Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's press conference to discuss the launch of Leaders for Climate Accountability. I'm Mike Mino. I'm the press secretary for the Center for Climate Integrity, and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to hear from 5 elected officials who are part of the founding class of Leaders for Climate Accountability. Each is going to give a brief opening statement, and then at the end, we're going to have time for some question and answers for members of the media who are on today. So when everyone's done with opening statements, if you'd like to ask a question, please just use the function at the bottom to raise your hand. And when it's your turn, I will call on you and turn on your audio so that you can ask your question live. But first, before we turn it over to the leaders, I'd like to introduce Richard Wiles, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Climate Integrity.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to give a little background on CCI and our role here. Some of you know the Center for Climate Integrity is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help communities across the country hold polluters accountable for the massive costs of climate change. So we help to organize and support this new network of public officials, the Leaders for Climate Accountability, after we heard from a number of elected officials across the country who are actively looking for ways to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable for its role in climate change, not just in the courtroom, but beyond. So today we're launching Leaders with 68 inaugural members from representing 18 states across the country. And it comes at a time when there are more than 24 states and municipalities that have filed lawsuits against the industry, either to recover the costs of climate damages that the companies knew their products would cause, or to hold those companies accountable for lying to the public about it, or both. Just last week, Annapolis, Maryland was the latest municipality to file suit. Like the tobacco and opioid industries, the oil and gas majors knew their products would cause what their own scientists called catastrophic climate change 50 years ago. But instead of doing the right thing, they lied about it, masterminding the most consequential disinformation campaign in human history. And now they want cities, counties, and states to pay for the damages. These leaders are here to protect their constituents from, among other things, the huge tax increases and unfair sacrifices that would require. And as they will make clear today, there are many ways to support and advance climate accountability at the local level, not just in the courtroom, but in state legislatures and in city and county governments across the country. So with that, excuse me, one more thing. Perhaps the most important thing that these leaders can do, though, is to raise awareness of the industry's role in causing the climate crisis and their role in lying about it. That is just as important in many ways as recovering the costs of the damages. And with that, I'll hand it back to Mike.
Thank you, Richard. And now we're going to go to Texas to hear from our first leader, Travis County Commissioner Brigid Shea.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks to everyone who's a part of this this new effort. I'm really excited about it. I am here in Austin, Texas, where we've been seeing firsthand the devastating and deadly consequences of the accelerating climate crisis. We were not at all prepared for the deep freeze that took down our electric grid, took down our water systems, and left huge bills. We're looking at something from a $20 to $50 billion cost just from this extreme weather that hit the state. Now, we were facing challenges in Texas long before the cold weather came. My area in Central Texas around Austin is extremely prone to wildfires and flooding. And we know these threats are becoming worse and more frequent because of climate change. As elected officials, we also know that making our communities more resilient against these threats is expensive. To give you just one example, in Travis County, on a few bond projects, we will be spending $26.5 million more because of climate change. We have to elevate roads higher and some bridges higher because of increased flooding from climate change. And we have to do everything we can to keep the public safe, but it's costing a lot more money. I think it's profoundly unfair to send the bill for these millions in increased costs to the taxpayers, while the polluters who caused these disasters don't pay a dime. We all know, thanks to the work of journalists, that major corporate polluters like Exxon, Chevron, Shell, BP, and others have known for decades that their products would cause climate change. And not only did they know, but they spent years and millions of dollars lying about it to protect their profits, while our communities have had to pay the price. That's why we're seeing a growing number of communities taking the industry to court to hold them accountable for their lies and the damage they've continued to cause, just like we did with the tobacco companies. As elected officials, it's our job to protect our constituents, and we are sick and tired of being lied to by the polluters and having our communities stuck with the cost of climate damages that the polluters knowingly caused. That's why I'm joining Leaders for Climate Accountability. I want to do everything I can to help transition away from the fossil fuels that cause climate change and to clean energy alternatives. But we also need to make sure there's accountability for the corporations that got us here in the first place. They should pay their fair share of the damage. I'm in Texas. I know how powerful the oil and gas lobby is, but we can't let ourselves be intimidated. We have to hold them accountable. We know each community's situation and needs are unique, and especially not every community has the resources to go to court. But we also know that local governments can be learning labs for policy solutions. And that's part of what this network is about as well, centering accountability in climate conversations and exploring and sharing ideas for how we as local officials can take action. So I'm thrilled that we're launching this today, and I appreciate you having me here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now we're going to head to Kentucky to hear from State Representative Attica Scott.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with everyone today. As the first Black woman elected to the Kentucky State Legislature in nearly 20 years, I know that people are looking to me to stand up for our communities. It is my responsibility to stand up for people over polluters. I'm clear about that, from Appalachia to rural Western Kentucky. In Louisville, my neighbors are dying from toxic air pollution. We know how we got here. Fossil fuels and the climate change they cause have a devastating impact on public health and our public health infrastructure, which is already strained by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, a recent Harvard study found that 1 in 5 premature deaths worldwide are caused by fossil fuel air pollution. 1 in every 5 deaths, that's more than 8 million people worldwide, because of burning fossil fuels like coal in Kentucky. Our communities face spiraling costs because of damage caused by climate change. The polluters who knowingly caused this crisis need to pay their fair share. The fossil fuel industry knew for decades that their products caused climate change, but they lied to the public to protect their profits. And now communities like mine are paying the price. My constituents in District 41, where I serve, should not be stuck paying the bill for a mess these companies made, from the cost of public health and damage to homes, an increase in heat waves in our urban heat island, and toxic air pollution. When this mess strikes Louisville, where I live, in the predominantly Black part of the city, it's hit the hardest. Of course, we know that these costs are even higher in Black, Indigenous, and people of color and low-income communities, where structural issues of inequality exacerbate our vulnerability to climate impacts. Asthma, for example, impacts nearly 1 out of every 10 children, and Black children are twice as likely to suffer from asthma, and 4 times as likely to die from it. 4 times as likely as white children to die from asthma. I want all of our children to be healthy and safe. Climate accountability is a racial justice issue. These companies need to be held accountable for the damage they have caused to communities across the United States. In Kentucky, we need a just transition, but we cannot have a just transition without accountability. I am joining Leaders for Climate Accountability because it is time to hold polluters accountable for their role in creating and perpetuating the climate crisis. As Leaders for Climate Accountability, we are committed to holding polluters accountable and protecting access to the courts, which is sometimes communities' best recourse for seeking justice. We want to ensure that every community is able to stand up to companies that put their profits over the health and safety of our constituents. Fossil fuel companies are fighting harder than ever to escape accountability for their role in creating and lying about the climate crisis. A growing number of our communities have taken oil and gas companies to court to hold them accountable. The industry is scared of these lawsuits and has fought tooth and nail to evade justice, including by lobbying Congress to pass a liability waiver, which would grant oil and gas companies complete and total immunity from all climate lawsuits. Industry lobbyists even tried to sneak one into COVID-19 relief. Dark money fossil fuel interests have also sought to block community access to the courts at the local and state level. Oh, but the power of organized people is much stronger than their money. We know that each community's needs and situations are unique. Through this network that we are creating and launching today, we are hoping to share and explore policy ideas, advocate for the needs of our constituents, and advance measures aimed at holding polluters accountable for their role in the climate crisis. As a legislator, I work to advance measures that will help my community, despite being in a legislative body where the supermajority has only heard one bill by a Black legislator in 5 years. I also work against bills that will harm my constituents, like the anti-protester bill we heard in committee last week, including protesters seeking environmental justice. We know that in many state legislatures, corporate special interests have attacked the ability of communities to access courts in order to hold bad actors accountable. One job of state legislators in our new network will be to go just as hard to protect access to the courts so that all communities are able to seek justice when they have been harmed. I look forward to learning from and sharing with legislative colleagues in this network. Again, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Scott. And now we're going to head to California to hear from State Senator Scott Wiener.
Great, thank you so much. I want to thank the Center for Climate Integrity and all of my colleagues, counterparts from around the country for all coming together to make clear that climate change we know is an existential threat to our planet. And we know that we want and we need the federal government to step in and take bold climate action. But we also know that at the state and local level, we have a responsibility to act for our own communities and collectively, particularly given the federal government's failure to really step in a meaningful way. I'm Scott Wiener. I have the honor of representing San Francisco and Northern San Mateo County in the California State Senate. And here in California, we have just seen profound impacts from climate change. We used to have a wildfire season that lasted for a few months every year. Our wildfire season is now essentially and effectively year-round because of climate change. In fact, a few weeks ago, our utilities issued alerts about potential power shutoffs in February, due to potential wildfires. That's just not that long ago. It would have been unthinkable that you would have had a wildfire alert and potential power shutoffs in February. Just extraordinary. We have had in the last few years, almost all of the largest wildfires in California history have happened in the last few years. And this is not just a coincidence. It's not just random. It is because of climate change. We are seeing sea level rise that threatens some of our major employers with their campuses being flooded. Our Embarcadero, our waterfront on the bay in San Francisco is at severe risk. Our subway system, our subway tunnels for BART and Muni are at risk of being flooded out. And it is long past time for us to not just continue to say this is something to deal with in the future. This is something where we can just do baby steps, a few baby steps every year. We need to solve this problem locally, state level, federally, and of course, globally. And in California, we're very progressive in a lot of ways, and we're well on our way towards decarbonizing our electric grid, for example, which is terrific. despite what some political leaders have said relating to the disaster in Texas. Clean energy is the future. But we still, we are a top oil extraction state here in California. And in fact, we have some of the most destructive oil extraction techniques because the wells are failing. And so they have to become more and more destructive, environmentally destructive to take out this oil. We are also, unlike Oklahoma and Texas, California has no setback or buffer zone requirements around drilling. You can drill right next to someone's house or right next to a school. And we are, by allowing this, we're allowing the poisoning overwhelmingly of low-income children and children of color, because we know that drilling is not happening in high-income white communities. So we're working this year both on, we're supporting the lawsuits, including the lawsuit of my own city of San Francisco, to hold these polluters, these fossil fuel companies accountable for the damages that they have caused to our communities. But we're also working at the policy level, and we're pursuing a ban not just on fracking, but on a variety of destructive oil extraction techniques. We want to require a half-mile setback around schools and homes and health centers. So you're not drilling right on top of where people live and go to school. We also have introduced aggressive legislation to require all large corporations to disclose their entire carbon footprint, including from their supply chains, and then to set science-based targets to reduce that carbon footprint and then to meet those targets. And so we are working in a pretty global way in terms of the fossil fuel industry and holding it accountable and pulling it back, and making sure that all of our large businesses are doing their part to fight climate change. So I'm really excited about this national collaboration, and I look forward to seeing it grow and thrive. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. And now we're going to head to New Jersey to hear from Atlantic County Commissioner Caren Fitzpatrick.
Thanks, Mike. It truly is an honor to be among the first cohort of leaders for climate accountability. Listening to Commissioner Shea's story of people impacted by the recent winter storm in Texas, I'm reminded of New Jersey after Superstorm Sandy. It's been 9 years and we're still dealing with the consequences. We know firsthand that the path to recovery will be long, and we know that making a state more resilient against extreme weather events is expensive and comes at a massive cost to taxpayers. Here in Atlantic County at the southern end of New Jersey and in other communities along the Jersey coast, we know too well how vulnerable we are to climate change impacts like increasingly severe storms, rising seas, and flooding. Like we saw in Texas with power outages and frozen pipes, these issues are a matter of practicality. Rising sea levels create higher tides and road closures due to flooding, which prevent our children from getting to school and working families from getting to their jobs. And these impacts and their associated costs are even more pronounced in low-income communities and communities of color, like the Lakes Bay and Back Bay Atlantic City areas. Like Senator Wiener's comments on wildfires, these flooding issues have gone from a coordination of a high tide and full moon to more than once monthly. This used to be a rare occurrence, and it's not rare any longer. New Jersey is fortunate to have climate leaders among our state officials who are taking bold action to confront these threats. For example, Governor Phil Murphy recently signed a law requiring municipalities to include climate change in their master plan updates and identify where infrastructure is vulnerable. But even this assessment, while necessary, will likely create new costs for already struggling municipal budgets. This can't be paid for on the backs of working families. We can't forget that this crisis and the financial burden it places on taxpayers wasn't a foregone conclusion. Oil and gas companies knew for decades that the burning of fossil fuels would lead to catastrophic consequences, and instead of warning the public, they spent millions of dollars lying about climate change in order to protect their bottom line, just like big tobacco. When I first learned about the deception of companies like ExxonMobil, I was furious. I don't want to see New Jersey taxpayers get stuck with a multi-billion-dollar bill to protect our homes, families, jobs, economies, infrastructure, and public health from the impacts of climate change, a crisis the oil and gas industry knowingly caused and perpetrated. Instead, I want to see New Jersey and our state leaders join the fight to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable. So municipal leaders here are taking action. The city of Hoboken, which faces existential threats from flooding, has filed a lawsuit seeking to make fossil fuel companies pay their fair share. But we know that not every community is going to have the resources to take that action. I've been part of a bipartisan group of New Jersey officials calling on Governor Murphy and our Attorney General Gruhl to take action on behalf of our state to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable. Last year, a bipartisan group of state legislators introduced a bill also calling for them to pursue legal action against fossil fuel companies for damages caused by climate change. And in July of last year, at my urging, the Atlantic County Commission passed our own resolution calling for the passage of that bill. Several other counties and municipalities have passed similar resolutions in support. There's a precedent for such action in New Jersey, while Governor Murphy's recently announced $100 million statewide electric vehicle program is funded in part through a settlement through Volkswagen over that company's efforts to cheat emission standards. As a leader for climate accountability, I plan to use my voice and my office to advocate for the interests of Atlantic County and all of New Jersey. And I know my fellow leaders here and around the country will do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. And now our final leader for climate accountability today, we're going to head to Illinois to hear from Alderman Matt Martin in Chicago.
Thanks very much, Mike, and good morning, everybody. Cities such as Chicago, as we've been hearing throughout this press conference, are on the front lines of the climate emergency. We've seen drastically shorter lifespans in communities of color most impacted by air pollution here in Chicago as well as elsewhere. And we face billions of dollars in damage in Chicago and across the Midwest due to flooding, lakefront erosion, and this damage from last summer's derecho. And we know what the principal cause of this devastation is. It's climate change. Worldwide, 9 of the 10 hottest summers since 2005. We've seen that. In 2020, it was the 5th warmest year on record here in Chicago. The 2 hottest years ever were 2016 and 2019, respectively. And critically, for every 1 degree of warming, the atmosphere can hold 4% more water vapor that can turn into precipitation. So it should come as no shock that 2019 was Chicago's 3rd wettest year on record, more than a foot greater than normal. And 4 of the 5 wettest years have occurred in the last decade here. Then zooming out a little bit to the Great Lakes region, from 1901 to 2015, Great Lakes states, including Illinois, had seen a 10% rise in annual precipitation. And since 2013, Lake Michigan, the shore of which Chicago sits on, has risen by 6 feet, resulting in tremendously devastating shoreline erosion that's impacted businesses, recreation, as well as homeowners and renters. Our communities can display their resilience by creating and executing emergency planning that's tailored to address directly the true scope of the challenges that we face. However, we can't do it alone as municipalities, counties, states, especially when we're not the primary cause of the ongoing climate crisis. As an attorney, I believe it's critical that we actively explore litigation here in Chicago as well as Illinois that will help us finally hold accountable those fossil fuel companies that are responsible for the climate crisis. It's not our taxpayers after all. So my sincere thanks to the Center for Climate Integrity for all their work in connection with this work, this environmental protection and resiliency. I look forward to partnering with them, with the other electeds here today, and with leaders for climate accountability across our country to bring about the bold transformational change that our constituents need and deserve. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Alderman Martin. And now for any reporters on the line who would like to ask questions, please just use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, and then I can give you audio access to ask your question to the group or an individual. Okay, our first question is going to be from Rebecca Hersher with NPR. Rebecca, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the strategy that I think came up in New Jersey about introducing legislation that requires the state to pursue litigation. I'm wondering if that shows up in other places or if it's something that this cohort is talking a lot about.
Mike, is that for me?
Yeah, Commissioner, if you want to address that, and then Richard might be able to talk at a national level about that too.
Okay. Well, there's a movement or a movement among municipal and county legislators to urge our Attorney General to join a lawsuit that mid-Atlantic states, including Connecticut and I believe Delaware or Massachusetts, I'm sorry, have already filed on behalf of their constituents. Where we also have cities that are joining in. As I said, Hoboken has filed their own lawsuit. Richard, do you want to talk about the federal?
Richard, you're on mute.
I think there are 6 attorneys general from across the country who have filed litigation against the oil majors, mostly for fraud that they've committed against the citizens of their state, mostly for the lying about climate change. And these cases are mostly under consumer protection statutes that give the attorneys general clear authority to enforce against the oil companies for this fraud. New Jersey, I think, is one of the most active places in the country in terms of state and local representatives and citizens organizing to attempt to get their attorney general to file a case. I think in all the rest of those cases, I'm not aware of any similar effort that urged those attorneys general to file the cases. I think they filed the cases because, one, other attorneys general had done so. The cases were out there. There are as many as, I think there's 25 cases in total at the municipal and attorney general level. And I think those cases were just a natural result of the fact that the industry lied. Those states face huge damages, and the attorney general used the tools available in those states to file against the oil majors. So there may be more states across the country that seek to do what New Jersey is doing. I think that would be a good thing if communities organize to try and get their attorneys general to take action. I think attorney general action could in some ways be the most effective. On the other hand, municipalities have unique damages from climate change that may not be covered by some of these attorney general's actions. So it may not be enough in a state for the attorney general to file if you're seeking to provide true financial compensation for the damages caused by the industry. So there's a role for both municipal and attorney general cases. So that was kind of a long-winded stage setting answer, I guess, but I hope that answers it, Rebecca, but if not, if there's a follow-up, go ahead.
And
that's great. Thanks.
Rebecca, I'll just add that in terms of local resolutions, like the one Commissioner Fitzpatrick's been a part of, to our knowledge, I don't believe there have been similar resolutions being passed by local governments calling for statewide litigation. Okay, our next question is going to be from Maxine Jodslow with E&E News. Maxine, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Thanks.
Oh, did I mute you? Can you hear us?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. My question was for Chicago Alderman Martin. I just wanted to clarify what he had said, where he said he thinks it's critical that we actively explore litigation against the fossil fuel companies. I wanted to clarify whether he or members of the Chicago City Council were in fact actively exploring that litigation.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Maxine. So it is something that we are actively exploring right now. And so we're figuring out some next steps in terms of conversations, not just within the city, but also at the state level as well, to figure out the best steps in terms of moving forward with this policy agenda.
Okay, did that answer your question, Maxine? Anything else?
That did. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. I know we have some other folks on, but I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll just do a final call. If there are any reporters on the line who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I can enable you to talk. Okay, well, if folks have follow-up questions, my email is mike@climateintegrity.org. And you can always contact us there for further questions. And I'd just like to thank everyone again for joining us today. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to everyone, and thanks for launching this national organization. I think it's going to be really important for us to be able to work together and to trade information and strategies and all that kind of thing. So it's great to meet you all, and thanks so much for starting it.
Thank you all for participating.
Here.
Really
Great.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Stay safe.
Bye.